Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to part 3 of our Student Affairs Ireland webinar series, Managing the Impact of COVID-19, Planning for Recovery. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name is Paul Moriarty, Chair of Student Affairs Ireland, the representative group for professionals working in the area of student affairs and student services in higher education in Ireland. So I'm delighted that you have been joining us in such large numbers, and we really do note the positive feedback that has already been received on the first 2 webinars. So I'm aware that there are 176 people registered for today, and I'm sure you will enjoy the session with me. I want to take this opportunity, as it's the last in the series of 3, to thank the Student Affairs Ireland Board, and particularly the Student Affairs Ireland Executive, for making this happen. I want to thank Ronan for his technical expertise, and Martha, especially our administrative support, who has been excellent throughout. And of course, I want to thank you for participating and for supporting the organisation. So please stay tuned to the Student Affairs Ireland website. You'll get useful information and resources there, including the recordings of these webinars. You will also be able to book a place on our upcoming workshop on the 24th of June. This is entitled Developing a Resource Kit for Student Orientation in the Context of COVID-19, and promises to be both supportive and practical. So thank you all. Enjoy today's session. And now I'm happy to hand you over to my colleague Noreen Deedy, and Vice Chair of the Student Affairs Ireland, who will introduce you to today's speaker again.
Noreen, you're muted. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much, Paul. Hello, everybody, and welcome again today to our final webinar. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Maeve Lankford. Maeve is a life mastery consultant, transformational coach, and facilitator, running her own consultancy since 2015. She worked in human resources in higher education in the UK and Ireland for 20 years, impacting sectorally as ambassador and contributor to the Aurora Women in Leadership programme. With an indefatigable belief in the power of the human spirit and our capacity to create positive change, Maeve works with individuals and organisations to empower people to create and live lives they love. Today, Maeve will share 3 strategies from her successful Standing Firm programme that will enhance our resilience and resourcefulness in any situation. You can access Maeve's blog at her website, www.maevelangford.com, and she tweets at Maeve Lankford. Maeve will speak for the next 45 minutes. At the end, we will have a Q&A session. And at the bottom of your screen, you will see that you can ask questions on that Q&A button. There is also a chat button, and we would ask you not to put questions into the chat button, but you can, if you need technical support, you can ask for it in the chat button. And Ronan, who is our technical expert, will, answer those questions for you and hopefully support you in any technical difficulties that you have. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you back to Maeve now. Thank you.
Okay, so hello everybody, Maeve here. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you again today. It's really an honor and a privilege to have this opportunity to share these strategies with you. So I'm going to start talking you through what I believe are strategies that can help us in any situation that is causing us anxiety or challenge. They absolutely for sure are helpful in the context of COVID-19 and your plans for recovery, but I believe they are genuinely strategies that you can use in any challenging situation. So the first strategy that I want to share with you today is this idea that we're more than our feelings, that you want to know that for yourself. We're more than our emotional response to the situation that we find ourselves in. And there's this lovely quote from Carl Sagan who says that, you know, the nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth, the iron in our blood, the carbon in our apple pies, we're all made in the interiors of collapsing stars. We are made of star stuff. So I just want to invite you to just breathe with me for a moment. So just, you know, take a deep breath in and out. And just notice, like, there is a power that's breathing you and breathing me, and it's greater than every one of us. And on one level, you know this, we've all tapped into this at some stage in our lives. So, you know, maybe whether in childhood or adulthood, there was a time in athletics and sports that you found like you had another gear that you were able to tap into that got you over the finish line or got you there first. And you didn't know you had that in you, but you proved it on the day or in the moment. Or maybe there's a time, you know, in music or art or in some kind of creative expression in your writing or your teaching, that you just found a flow and a way of expression that you would say didn't really come from you, that creativity flowed through you, but it wasn't really you. You didn't know it was there. Or maybe you have had an experience, you know, with a distressed colleague or a distressed student, and in the moment you just found the perfect thing to say. And again, you would say you don't know where it came from, but you know, you found it in the moment. So there is this kind of brilliance that is bigger than us, but that is within us. There's the brilliance in our bodies that causes us to breathe. We don't even have to think about it, but you know, we take oxygen in and we let the carbon dioxide out, and it happens naturally. The blood flows through, pumped by the heart through the body, and all of that happens. And there's a kind of intelligence to it, the intelligence that keeps, you know, the atmosphere working, so that, you know, the stars stay in the sky and the earth rotates and the sun rotates around it. There is an infinite intelligence that's there, that's working in and through us, that we are part of. And it's bigger than any circumstance that we find ourselves in any given moment, including now with all that's happening with COVID-19. So part of you has always known this, and part of you knows that you're made of star stuff. And this strategy that I'm talking about today is you remembering that, you knowing that you are more than that. So I want to give you some affirmations that you can use into the days and weeks ahead that kind of help to keep us in that state of knowing. So I'm going to share a few with you, and we'll go through them one by one, and we'll try them out. So one of them will probably resonate with you more than any of the other three. I'm going to share 4. So pick that one, and then the invitation is that into the days and weeks ahead, that you would use this affirmation. You could write it out and say it to yourself regularly. The thing that makes the difference with affirmations is to use them repeatedly. And when we do that, then it starts to reset our energy and reset the neural pathways in the mind. It rewires them, and it sets them onto messaging, internal messaging that is more useful to us and resources us and helps to keep us in alignment with the experiences that we would like to have, and that we want to move towards creating in our lives, rather than being caught in our emotional reactivity to what's going on in the moment. So you do have to use them repeatedly, like I said. So, you know, one great tip is to just put them on a Post-it note. I have a Post-it note in front of me that with an affirmation that I'm working with at the moment. I can see it every day. It's on my keyboard. People maybe might put them on a mirror, where you brush your teeth or where you wash your hands at the moment. We're doing a lot of that. You could put it maybe on the dashboard if you're driving a bit more again, or even put it into your phone so that it's there and you can look at it maybe periodically throughout the day. So put it someplace where you can see it, and especially when you notice in yourself that you're in a state of anxiety or you're getting worried about something, then use your affirmation to reconnect with that part of you, like I say, that knows that there's more to you than your emotions and feelings in the moment, and that you're bigger than the circumstances. So these are the couple of affirmations that I suggest and that I share in my Standing Firm program. So you can use this, we'll speak them out loud together. Everybody, I think, apart from me, is on mute, so you can use your own name. So I would say, if I was using this one, that I, Maeve, I'm so much more than my circumstances. Or a related one is, I, Maeve, am so much more than my experiences. Or you could say, I, Maeve, am so much more than my feelings. And again, connecting with our knowing, we can say, you know, that which is within me is greater than whatever's happening in my experience. That which is within me is greater than, you know, my worry about induction in September. That which is within me is greater than, you know, my concern about my finances at the moment. So you make it personal, use it in a way that really is accurate to what it is you're concerned about in the moment. And the final one is more generic. I will have this experience, but I refuse to let it have me. So that, you know, I can go through this, but I will not be overwhelmed by it. So one of those maybe will have a certain resonance for you, or certainly feel free to create one for yourself. But the intention is that you would have a go-to affirmation that you know is ready there into the days and weeks ahead, that when you start to feel a sense of anxiety or concern rising up in you, that you can automatically go to that affirmation and even say it to yourself, you know, in those moments of hand washing or teeth brushing, that you're programming yourself even before the worry starts to arise. So we know that, like, we're programmed biologically to that, you know, when we get into fear or anxiety, we feel one of these three states. We get into fight mode, into flight mode, or into freeze, like that startled fawn. So this is going to occur when we're experiencing challenges. You know, we're going to have some of these emotional reactions. So I want to teach you again how to work with it. We know it's going to happen, and you want to be able to notice it when it's happening and move yourself out of that state as quickly as possible. So these are some suggestions for how you can do that, and how you can stay in this idea of knowing that you are more. So these are the 3 R's that I share with you and that I teach to my clients all the time. And again, this would be something that you could use with your students, any of you who are indeed with a colleague or a friend, to help people in terms of shifting out of anxiety. So the first R is to recognize, to notice what you're noticing. For each of us, you know, we'll have a kind of familiarity someplace in our body. We'll notice that we're in anxiety mode, that's our embodiment of being in fight, flight, or freeze. So, you know, that might be tension in the jaw, clenching of the teeth. It might be a tightness in the chest. For some of us, it's butterflies in the stomach. We could maybe get tension headaches. So you want to know, how do you experience anxiety in your body, and remind yourself and catch yourself when you're feeling that, recognize what's happening. And in that moment, then the second R is to refresh yourself. And we do that with the breath. Okay, so I know Ian was teaching the deep breathing with, you know, counting in for 5 and out for 6. I'm going to do one with you today where we just breathe in deeply. We'll do this together 3 times. So breathe in deeply, hold at the top for a moment, and then breathe out as if you're blowing through a straw. So we'll do that 2 more times together. So breathing in deeply, holding at the top of the breath, and then blowing out like we're blowing out through a straw. And then 1 more time, breathing in, holding at the top, and then breathing out like through a straw. So again, we just notice, even just doing those 3 breaths together, that it just starts to shift things in the body. We start to calm down. And now you can start to think more clearly. So when we're in reactivity mode and fight, flight, or freeze, that's the limbic brain, and we're just in reaction. But when we calm things down, then we can actually move to the prefrontal cortex of the brain, where we're actually capable of making higher order decisions and better choices. and we use the breath to get into that space. And then when we're there, the third R is to repattern. The breathing creates a pause, a shift in that kind of chemical reactivity in the body, and allows us to think for a moment. And then it's in that moment of pause and repatterning that you can insert your affirmation and say it repeatedly. So this is how we start to change then and create the opportunity for that rewiring in the brain. So these are the 3 R's, and the invitation is to use it consistently when you recognize that you're getting into anxiety mode, noticing what's happening in your body, using the breath to calm everything, create just enough space to start getting into a clearer thinking space. And then repatterning by using the affirmation and then using it repeatedly to get you into that kind of higher order thinking space. So that was strategy number 1. Our second strategy is around harnessing the power of perspective. So when we're in that kind of reactive mode, like I was saying, you know, when we're in flight, fight, or freeze, they roll off the tongue. We need to move out of reactivity and into creativity. And so part of that is how we use the breath to create that space. And some bright spark, you know, playing with the words, was able to see that all we have to do is to remove the letter C to the start. When we put the C at the start, we move out of reactive into creative. And it reminds us that what we need to do is to be able to see clearly. And that's where the power of perspective comes into play. So let's talk a little bit about that, about how we can actually harness that power of perspective for ourselves. And one way that I share with clients to do this is to take the 30,000 foot view. So like imagining we were up in an airplane and able to look down at what's happening and using that kind of sense of space and distance and height to create a different perspective. So this, I just took this photo. This is where I live. This is my little village in North Cork. And down here someplace is where I live. And you can do this for yourself if you want a visual. I just, you know, got this on Google Maps. But it's this idea that when we start to create space and height and distance, that suddenly, you know, when I look at this for myself, if I'm starting to feel in a sense of overwhelm, that suddenly, you know, looking down on it from that height, I suddenly see that, you know, I'm just like one person in one room, in one house, that's part of, you know, a whole village, that's part of a much bigger parish and community, that's part of, you know, a bigger county, that's part of a country that belongs in a bigger world, in a bigger universe. And suddenly, you know, it starts to give me perspective about, you know, I'm just one person in the midst of all of this. And you know, rather than making me feel small or insignificant, it just starts to help me see that, you know, there's much more going on here than what's going on in and for me. So we use this idea to help us to get into, again, that kind of higher order thinking and harnessing the mental faculty of perception to expand our perspective and to guide our thinking, so that we harness, you know, better kinds of thinking, so that we start to look for what, you know, what's the bigger truth in this situation. Yes, they're the facts of the ins and outs of my experience, but what's the bigger truth of what's going on here? And that allows us to stay open and to see the good that is inherent in every situation, that, you know, that every cloud has a silver lining, that there's great truth in that saying, and we want to open up the truth of that for ourselves. Many of you will have heard me use the quote repeatedly during these times from Napoleon Hill. He said that in every adversity, in every failure, in every heartbreak, that there is a seed of equal or greater benefit. So when we start to move into perception and perspective thinking, we start to be able to open up the possibility for ourselves to be able to see what are the seeds of good in this situation that we could maybe harness and nurture and plant and grow in order for there to be a good outcome for us at the end of this. So sometimes, you know, when I share an idea like this, these are all the ideas I share, they're kind of simple ideas. which doesn't make them in some levels any easier to implement, but sometimes in their simplicity they can sound like, really, would that really help? Would that really make a difference? So I just want to share with you the story of Teddy Roosevelt, who was president of the United States at the turn of the last century, and during the First World War he was at the helm there. So at a time when the world was going through huge chaos, when he personally and his cabinet, everybody around him, was going through a lot of overwhelm in terms of the enormity of the situation and the decisions they were being called on to make. And story has it that Roosevelt would get up from the table when it all started to feel too much, and he'd go outside on the veranda, and they were often working late into the night, and he'd look up at the sky and literally look at this spiral galaxy in Andromeda, and he'd be looking at it and he'd say, that's Andromeda, that's a spiral galaxy in the sky, and it's as large as our Milky Way, and it's one of 100 million galaxies. And story has it that he would just keep repeating that over and over, saying that, that's the spiral galaxy in Andromeda, it's the size of our Milky Way, and it's one of 100 million galaxies. And after a while, he would finally say, okay, now I've made my problem small enough. And he'd come back in and they'd be able to carry on. So I want to invite you to have an experience of this with me today in terms of how we can create that sense of perspective in our own lives and have our own experience, like Roosevelt's, of going out onto a veranda and looking up and creating that sense of perspective and space. So if you have pens and papers on the go, I invite you to put them down. And if you want, maybe even close your eyes, but put everything to one side. And let's just ground ourselves and take 3 deep breaths together. So you put your feet flat, hands on your lap maybe, and we'll take 3 breaths together. So breathing in and out. And again. And out. And one more time. And imagine now, as you're settling in your body, imagine you can just expand your awareness out beyond, anything that you're feeling internally, and just expand your awareness out to the edges of the room that you're in. And then imagine like you can go up over yourself as if you're hovering, looking down and able to see yourself from a height. And then imagine that you can take yourself up higher. Maybe you're floating over your own home, looking down. And then imagine yourself almost like you can fly, soaring over your neighborhood, seeing, the multiplicity of housing and whatever else is around you in nature in that space. And then up over the city, even floating up into space. Imagining like you're looking down on the earth, looking down, way, way, way down, seeing, specks of, even just trying to identify where you are on that globe. And then going even further again, imagining yourself in that expansive space, part of multiple galaxies. And when you're in that place and having your awareness in the expansiveness of space, where you can see and witness and see the largest possible view and perspective, I invite you to just inquire, like, what's the deeper truth that you can see about your life right now, about your family and about the wider human community? And what's the most valuable and empowered meaning that you can make right now of all that's happening? What can you see or sense from this larger perspective? Einstein said you can't solve a problem at the level of a problem. You have to go to this higher perspective. So from that space of higher perspective, what's the larger picture that you can see in terms of all that's happening in the world at the moment? And what's the most important thing for you to know and access right now so that you can hold a kind of deeper and greater truth about your life, about yourself, about your future, about your family's future? This is a time of intense disruption for all of us personally, but for us as a nation, for us as an international community. So, you know, it might be seeing in this higher perspective that we start to tap into the, you know, the bigger perspective about what's possible for us as a human community, about the opportunity that's there for positive change in our world. We've seen talk about, you know, the impact on the climate already, that, you know, that there are parts of China where people could see the sky for the first time in a generation, or, you know, I think it was in Venice, they were saying that the fish were back in the water in the canals for, again, the first time in over a generation. So things can change very quickly, and the climate and the environment can recover very quickly when it has space. So what is the possibilities that we're seeing at the moment around that? And, you know, as a nation and as an international community, what are we seeing as the bigger perspective in terms of how we might address inequalities in society, how we might really give voice and reality to saying that Black Lives Matter? There's a lot of things that are happening that are opening up in terms of the bigger possibilities for us. So what is the higher truth or the great perspective that you can have that's bigger than maybe the emotional turmoil you've been feeling at a more personal level in the context of what's happening with COVID-19? And when you step back like this into that bigger perspective, what can you tap into that you know is more important for you to know than just the limited initial emotional response? So just feeling what happens when we step back like this and step outside of ourselves and open up into the expansiveness that's there. And know that you can access this. You can, you know, just take that time, take a few deep breaths, and then allow yourself to just float up into that higher spacious space where you can tap into this. And then know that the initial emotional response that we have to crisis and emergency, whether it's COVID or whether it's anything else, maybe there were things in your life that, you know, pre-existed COVID that were causing anxiety and concern as well. But reminding ourselves that our initial response to the challenge or the situation, the emotional response, isn't the most accurate one in terms of where this could lead us and what the potential future outcome might be. And when we start to take that bigger perspective, it helps us to separate things out and to make things small enough, like Roosevelt talked about, to make them small enough to have a perspective that sees it, you know, in relationship to everything else and to other bigger things that are happening at a community and a national and an international level. And that in that moment we can begin to see and hold perspective and bring it back to bear on the challenges that we're experiencing in the here and now. So thank you for taking that little experiment with me. And now we're going to move on to just look still with the same idea of managing perception and perspective, and just sharing with you very quickly the whole idea of harnessing the power of gratitude in all of this. And in terms of perception and gratitude, this idea from Robert Holden that says the miracle of gratitude is that it shifts your perception to such an extent that it changes the world you see. So again, like the phrase or the quote from Wayne Dyer, or at least Wayne popularized it. He says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So, you know, even when we feel things are stuck and in a fixed pattern around us, when we change how we relate to all of that, even though the outer circumstances don't change a whole lot, our experience of them can change completely. So these are some ways that we can work with gratitude. So there are two types of gratitude. One is gratitude for the things that we have, and another, which is a kind of elevated form of gratitude in a way, is to be capable of being grateful in the situations in which we find ourselves. So on one level, you know, being grateful for what's good and what's already there is an easier ask. And And some of the ways that we can kind of put that into practice, if you don't already have a gratitude practice, is to just look every day to develop a habit that every day, just using your fingers to count them off. What are 5 things that I feel grateful for today? And, you know, they can be big things or small things, then they might vary from day to day. You know, sometimes it might be just that I woke up today, that I am breathing, that I'm as well as I can be, that I'm safe from coronavirus for another day, that my family is well and safe. It might be that, you know, it might be aspects to do with work. For, you know, for me personally, I feel very grateful at the moment for all we can do remotely and with technology. So we develop ways of acknowledging the good that's there in our lives at the moment. And if you have a gratitude practice already, this is a suggestion to up level it. So moving beyond, you know, 5 things every day, that you would actually keep a gratitude journal for a month. And start with writing 5 things the first day, and then that evening review your list and add, you know, maybe another 5 things that you feel grateful for. And then the next morning, always reading it, you want to get into the feeling of the gratitude. So it's not just the writing of it, but it's being in the experience of feeling gratitude. That's what's important. But if you want to do this practice over 30 days, the idea is that you would, every day, you'd be adding something new, at least one new thing every day. And over time, that builds our spiritual muscle a bit, because, you know, the easy things come first. But over time, then we get stretched a bit to add an additional thing, another thing, a newer thing. And the more we do that, I suppose, the more we realize that we have so much to be grateful for, and that as we add to it, the more enhanced our experience of gratitude becomes over that period of the month. And then I want to invite you to just think about this idea of unconditional gratitude in. So this is even when it feels like a tough situation, even when it feels like something that's uninvited, unwanted, you know, unappreciated in the moment, that we actually choose to look for something in that experience that we can still be grateful for. So that quote there is an effort to take us in that direction, that I realize that every situation in life has some purpose, and I thank the universe for it. That if it's happening to me, there's a reason that it's happening, that there's learning for me in this in some way, that there's an experience in this in some way that I need to experience and grow from. So that we have a kind of attitude of gratitude, regardless of whether what's happening is something that we would say is a nice experience or a not so nice experience. So whatever it is, we would bless it and be grateful for it, and for the learning and the experience that is there for us to have in it. So, and this is a quote from St. Paul, who wrote in the New Testament around this experience of being grateful in. He says that in whatever condition, that I've learned one thing at least, that in whatever condition I find myself, therein to be grateful. When we let ourselves feel grateful in all things, we create a generative gratitude, and it changes us. It changes our awareness, and it changes our experience. So that's the invitation, to be able to be a person of appreciation, even in the things that we dislike. And as I say, I know that's a big ask. It requires of us to stretch our willingness to look for the good, but that's how we start to transform difficult situations. It's when we start to first look for the good, and then give appreciation for the good that's there, even in advance of knowing what it is, and even in advance of being able to see what the potential good in this experience might be. So that was strategy number 2 for today, working with the power of perspective and the power of gratitude. And strategy number 3 is this idea to stay curious. Okay, so stay open to possibility. So the The Standing Firm program that I teach, it's based at least in part on some of the work from the hero's journey, which many of you will know from the work of Joseph Campbell. So Campbell looked at, you know, different cultures, different societies through the ages, and saw that in all societies there is this appreciation and acknowledgement that the human experience is one of challenge, not ultimately always challenge, but that's part of our journey, that we experience challenge. It's part of the human experience, and that we can see and learn and develop ways of dealing with challenge and adversity that help us. And he talks about the journey being one of 3 stages: departure, initiation, and return. And each of them has its own questions that go with it. So the departure is like, you know, when the challenge starts, and we realize that, you know, we're going to have to do something to deal with this. And part of it is that, you know, what are we going to need to leave behind on this hero's journey? And I share with people this idea that, like, there's no change without change. So when a challenge comes up and we have to do something to respond to it, it requires change. That means that there's going to be something different. So life as you know it today, and if you want to have different results, different outcomes, move beyond the challenge and the adversity and the situation to, you know, a life that you would love, to results that you would be proud of, it's going to require changes. So what are you going to have to leave behind to move beyond this challenge? So for some of us, that might be letting go of relationships, or at least changing the nature of relationships. And for some of us, it might be letting go of behaviors or habits. Now, I talked yesterday about, you know, in terms of your health and well-being, or in terms of your relationships, what are the things that you need to resolve and to make better? So if, for example, in terms of health and well-being, I want to get fitter and healthier, well, I might need to change a behavior, an existing behavior that has me sat in front of the TV for a couple of hours every evening. And I have to change that behavior to become the person who instead goes to the gym a couple of nights a week, or gets out walking, or, you know, at minimum, maybe gets up on my exercise bike at the same time as watching the TV. So there, you know, in order for there to be new results and different outcomes, there has to be change in some of the behaviors or habits. Some of it is about letting go of patterns of belief. So, you know, believing that, you know, this is all bad, believing that this is all terrible and a challenge. Maybe I have to let go of some of that and entertain ideas that are more empowering, like that there is some good in this, that I can be grateful for this experience, that I can have this experience without it having me. So that's why we use affirmations to help us, you know, shift out of old negative patterns of belief and replacing them with new ones. And for some of us, you know, maybe our hero's journey means that we're going to change the way we work. It might mean leaving a job. It might mean changing the nature of a job and learning new skills, or you know, working in new ways. Remote working is teaching us all of that at the moment. It might be about increasing your hours, or reducing your hours. It might be like you're going through at the moment, approaching student induction in whole new ways, because you won't have that face-to-face experience with people. So it's all about how is the journey going to change you, and what do you need to leave behind. And then we get into that phase of initiation where you start to discover about yourself things that you didn't know were there. So, you know, maybe you're realizing you're more resilient, or that you have the persistence that it's going to take, or, you know, that for me, like this whole journey with technology, any of you who know me from UCC will know it was never my kind of strength that I saw in myself, but I've had to learn things in that space and discover things about what I'm capable of doing that I would never have said I could have done. So, you know, those reserves of courage or tenacity or new skills, you know, that potential, those were always within you, but the challenge now is calling them out. It just needed this experience of the challenge in order for them to reveal themselves. So what are you discovering about yourself that you didn't previously know? And then the return, you know, as we start to assimilate the experience, embody the changes, the questions we can ask ourselves are, you know, what good can come from this? And what's the gift in this experience for you? This is where we really start to know what that seed of potential was for us, and where we start to really come into connection with that silver lining, and we start to identify what it was. So opening up, you mightn't know what the good is at the moment, you might know what the gift is, but opening ourselves up to that good revealing itself to you, to being open to seeing what it is over time. Maybe you have new priorities. Maybe you feel more connected to yourself or to others in your life. Maybe there's some new practices you're embracing or new skills that you're learning. So just keep yourself open to the possibility in all of that. And then I want to share with you two more what I believe to be really high vibration questions in terms of helping to create transformation in our lives. So those other two questions are, how would my best self show up here? So we'll take them one at a time. So when we ask, how would my best self show up here? It's not about playing down the challenge in the situation, and it's not about denying, you know, that things are really difficult, either in our own lives or maybe, you know, again, if you're thinking about the students, it's going to be a different experience for them. There are going to be real challenges in all of this. And maybe for some of you, there are real challenges. You know, maybe you have partners or kids or family members who have been sick with COVID. Maybe you have people in your lives who have lost jobs or are on furlough. Maybe there's a real dip in income that's coming into your homes and your household budget. And I don't in any way want to diminish the challenge in some of that. But what's also true is that so we don't get to choose some of these things that happen to us, but we do get to choose our response to it. We do get to choose how we behave and respond and make choices and decisions in the face of what has happened. And again, you know, sometimes, as I say, it's easy for me to say that, and it can sound kind of trite. So I want to share with you the example of Viktor Frankl, who wrote about, you know, this power that comes in being our best selves and making choices around how we want to respond. Viktor Frankl, I'm sure, again, many of you will know, he wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. And he wrote it on the basis of his experiences in Nazi Germany and being in a concentration camp. And there came a day when, you know, the only thing he had left that was, you know, he would have said his external reminder of life before the concentration camps and life before the horror of the Holocaust was his wedding band. And one day the guard saw that he still had his wedding band and said, okay, hand it over. And he said in that moment, it was the end of everything on one level for him, symbolically the end of everything. But he also said that in that moment, he knew that the guard had no power over him in the context of how he was going to respond to that situation, and that gave him all the power in the situation. And we all have that. We have that power to choose always how we're going to respond in the situation, no matter how tough that situation is and no matter how challenging the circumstances. We can still show up as our best selves. That's a choice that is always there for us to make. So I just want to remind ourselves of how powerful it is to know that that choice is there. And that second question then is, what would love do here, or what would love do now? So instead of asking, what should I do, or what's wrong with me, why am I not doing better here, that we just ask a different question that allows a much more powerful response to come in. And that question is, what would love do here? How would love respond here? And even if you're in a conversation with a student or a colleague or a family member who's struggling, to bring that question to it, what would love do here? It changes the nature of the inquiry between the two of you, and it brings you and them to a higher order of thinking in the response. And maybe if it's very challenging working at home with multiple maybe generations or multiple parties all trying to use the bandwidth, broadband, all trying to use laptops and computers at the same time. And, you know, it can be very challenging, very, very challenging at the moment. When you ask that question of yourself and, you know, all you want to do is pull your hair out, it just shifts you into a different space. And what would love do here is a question that dramatically alters how we relate to the people and the circumstances we're in. And if we're courageous enough to ask these questions, if we're courageous enough to listen to the answers that come to us when we ask that question, either of those questions, then it brings us to a place of love and compassion for ourselves and for others. And it starts to transform both our lives and the relationships that we have within it. So hugely, hugely transformational questions if we you know, allow ourselves to lean into them and to see what kind of questions come in response. So those are the 3 strategies for today that I believe can enhance our resilience in any situation. Just to recap, to know that you're more than your feelings, work with affirmations and the 3 R's to repattern yourself and to use those affirmations in very powerful ways. To look at the power of perception in terms of taking that higher level view and working with the power of gratitude and staying curious to, you know, where's the good in all of this? What could be the potential in terms of positive outcomes here, and asking ourselves really high frequency questions to stay in that kind of positive inquiry mode and being open to seeing and finding the answers that help us to see opportunity and possibility. So in terms of actually applying these ideas, you know, what I'm inviting you to do is to really notice how you're focusing your attention, asking yourself, you know, what's a new perspective I can have on this? Implementing a gratitude practice if you don't already have one, or up leveling the practice that you have, and staying curious. And these are strategies and tools. I call it life work because we can bring them into the rest of our lives. So just to let you know, I've made reference a couple of times, and I think Noreen mentioned it as well. I run a program called Standing Firm, or the full title is Standing Firm When Your World is Shaking. It's an online kind of group coaching program, and it's running at the moment. It's a 4-week program, and some of the strategies I've shared today come from the first 2 weeks, but there's still 2 more weeks to go in it. So if you like these ideas and you find them helpful, and if you haven't been with me on Standing Firm before, or even if you have and would like to be reminded of the ideas again, that's still open. So Ronan is going to share a link to all of that. I think he'll put it up on the SAI website, so you can join in. We the next 2 Wednesdays at 8 p.m. So the link will take you to a landing page, and you can put in your name and email there, and then you'll get the alerts to come and join us and get the resources and the worksheets that go with that. So for now, thank you so much. I think I'm going to stop the share, and we're going to go into some Q&A with Noreen. So thank you, folks.
Thank you very much, Maeve. That was fantastic. 3 strategies, as you said, that sound fairly simple enough, but are very difficult actually when you kind of focus on them. And it was great that you again, this is the 3rd day that we've had a breathing exercise kind of to change the chemistry in our brain. And I've been doing it for 3 days now with each speaker, and it actually does work.
Yes. It does. It really does.
So the breath is really, really important.
Yes.
Yeah.
It shifts the chemistry in the body and buys us time and space. Yeah, absolutely.
So what would you say about mindfulness, Maeve? What would you encourage people to become more mindful? Are there resources that you can direct people to on being mindfulness exercises?
Yeah, I mean, and I think maybe Ian had some resources as well. I didn't know. He talked about a website called No Worries. The one I often recommend is Headspace. It's an app and a a website as well, but you can download the app, and it has some free resources and some paid for resources. I think for anyone who doesn't really have a meditation practice or a mindfulness practice, it really makes a difference to start maybe with some guided meditations to just kind of get you used to the idea. And there's also, I really like him anyway, an Irish writer on mindfulness, Padraig O'Moraine. He writes in the Irish Times, but he also has written a couple of books on mindfulness, and he has great resources on his website as well. I can give you the link, Noreen, if you're going to put some of these resources up. I did some training with Padraig, but I don't know. I mean, I get nothing by referring you to him, but I think sometimes from my experience is that I just love sometimes to hear an Irish voice, and there aren't always Irish voices on, often it's American or maybe English. So I like, Tara Brack, somebody is mentioning there, I'm seeing in the chat as well, fabulous, and her website is fabulous in terms of resources. I would really highly recommend her as well. And I think it's the University of California at Berkeley. They have a fabulous mindfulness center as well, and again, lots of online resources. So, like, to be honest, anybody who's interested in finding resources online, there's loads out there. And I would say, if you're starting out, and we're saying the past 3 days, if people have been doing these exercises every day, they're being introduced to using the breath. So keep going, keep building on it. And even just for 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, what I was taught when I was starting was to give a commitment that I'm going to do this breath awareness for just even 2 minutes, and then set your clock maybe, so that, and then just decide you're going to do it until the alarm goes off, and just no matter how much you're thinking, did I set the alarm, is it going to go off, that you just stay in it and keep coming back to the practice, and then build that up over time until even 2 minutes makes a difference, I would say. But
Okay.
for most of us, maybe we'd like to build that up to 10 or 15 or 30 minutes, and really feel the benefit of it. It helps to do it regularly, so if you have a morning or an evening time that works for you, it helps, if you have a set time and place to go to for it. Those are all tips that help. But the most important thing is just do it, just try it.
Yeah. I actually, after Ian's presentation, the first day, I downloaded the Buddhify app.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the accents aren't Irish, but actually there's this wheel, and you can even pick one to help you to sleep or relax, or it's very good actually. So I just did that the other day, and it's excellent. Yesterday, Maeve, we were asked about could you direct people to resources that would help them generally to reflect more, so that they can visualize their future selves.
Sure. So I did think about that overnight, and there's a great I guess she's a writer, maybe a coach you'd call her as well. Linda Monk is her name. So she writes an awful lot about journaling, and these are a couple of questions that Linda had in some resource that I had, and I can give you a link to it, but just to share a couple of questions if people want to jot them down. So one is, what lights your fire? Just what lights you up? What are the things, even to think back as a kid, what did you love as a kid? How did you spend your time? And is there a longing in your heart that's going unexpressed at the moment? And what would that be? And how would your life be different if you listened to the whispers inside, the whispers in your heart, the kind of little nudges that are there, the longings that I would have talked about yesterday in the session? How would your life be different if you leaned into them? And finally, the suggestion, to write about a time in your life when you did follow your heart's desire, and what did that feel like, and what happened, and who are you now because of honoring that inner wisdom?
Yeah.
So it helps to open us up to possibility.
Great, thank you, Maeve.
You're most welcome.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and as you say, we can put these resources on our website as well. So
Yes.
anything that you can give us, we'll put it up there to support.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about staying curious and the hero's journey? You mentioned Joseph Campbell.
Yes. So this idea is that that, well, I suppose, well, two things. One is this idea that, like, every human life is going to have adversity and challenge, that's just part of the human experience, and I do subscribe to that, because, like, the human experience is of polarity. So we know good because we know bad, we know happiness because we know sadness. That's how we experience emotion, that's how we understand it. So the trajectory is never going to be plain sailing, because the whole point of it is that we learn the difference and the opposites in order to experience the world more fully. So in that context, then we can learn ways of being with challenge that allow us to overcome it, or to learn through it, however you want to conceptualize what we do with challenge. But when we move beyond it and learn from it, there are kind of stages to it. So that was like, the departure, what do we have to leave behind? The initiation, what new skills are we having to develop and use, and how have we grown as a person? So it's those questions then that Campbell kind of mapped onto the hero's journey that help us to kind of, I guess, recognize where we are in the process, which is kind of empowering in and of itself, that we know we're going through stages, and that these are expected stages, that these are things that we can work with. And he gives us those kind of questions, I think, that are very powerful in terms of opening things up. So, and this was true of me, like, when I was starting out, when I left, my experience of higher ed and went out on my own, you can get into this kind of like, what's wrong with me? Why isn't it happening quicker? What am I doing wrong? And I remember saying to my coach at the time, I kind of said, like, what am I doing wrong here? And he just started to laugh. Like, he's like, what a crap question, he said, like, have we taught you nothing? And I was like, okay, like, what's a better question? And he said, because he was saying, you have to start getting good at asking better questions, Maeve, so what can I learn here? Or what do I know that I didn't know already? Or, what am I being called to do differently here? It's like that idea that if we keep doing the same old, we keep getting the same old. So, and the challenges keep coming for us to learn. So as soon as we've learned what we need to learn from that experience, we don't have to have it again. So if there's something, even if you're looking back on past experiences that were really difficult, I would say you can look back on that and say, well, what did I learn from that? How did it cause me to grow? How am I a better person because of having that experience? And once we start to do it, we don't have to have that experience again, because we've taken the learning, we've identified the learning, and so we don't need to have the experience because it has served its purpose.
Okay, thank you very much, Maeve. That's really good. That's very helpful. Thank you, and thank you for sharing that as well, that story. Okay, I think we're just about finished. I just want to remind people that, or just to say that a lot of people who are with us today were also with us yesterday. A lot of you put your names down for, Maeve was very generous and offered 1 hour of a free coaching session with her. Lots of people, maybe 40 people, looked for that. She's 15 places. She's going to start working through some of those in the next while. I'm not sure, Maeve, but you did say that, like, you don't have the capacity, of course, to give 40 hours, but you will start working through the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just very quickly, Noreen, I'll do the first 15. I'll get out in touch with the first 15 really quickly, and then, as the weeks go by, I'll keep the offer open, but just so that people will know that it might take a bit longer to get to it. But I will work beyond the 15.
Okay, that's really, really generous. Thank you very much, Maeve.
My pleasure.
Okay, so I'm going to leave it because I know that people are anxious to get back to their whatever, maybe lunch even now at this stage for some people. So thank you everybody for joining us over the last 3 days. Some of you might have been with us for all 3 days. I know that a lot of you have been with us for the last 2 days. So you will find additional resources in the next 2 to 3 weeks on our website. So just keep visiting the Student Affairs Ireland website for those resources, and we'll keep in touch with you. So stay connected with one another as well, and we'll see you on the 24th of June at the orientation work group. And when Maeve was talking about, you know, perspective, I was taking myself out, you know, that 30,000 foot view, because I'm sort of in the middle of orientation, planning online orientation at the moment. So we'll see anybody who's interested in orientation, we'll see you on the 4th of June. So that's it for me. Thank you. 1,000 thanks, Maeve, for being with us
Pleasure.
for 2 days.
My pleasure.
A pleasure. Lots of learning, a lot to focus on as well, and certainly a lot of food for thought. So thank you very much again. Goodbye, everybody, and the best of luck. Stay safe and stay
Take
well.
care.
Bye.
Bye now.